appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, this presentation with everyone. I wanted to thank the Chemung Chamber of Commerce and Kamala and Emily, of course, and also the Olean Chamber of Commerce and Mimi, who we've worked with both organizations for many, many years. And we were talking in the pre-talk a little bit about collaboration, and this webinar is a great example of collaboration between chambers and different communities, but we're all truly in this together. So this is an opportunity to reach out to a little bit wider audience. So with that, very briefly about Data Branch. Data Branch is a information technology solutions provider, managed services provider. We've been in business since 1985, which in computer years is a fairly long time. We're headquartered in Olean, New York, but we cover a pretty big geography. And we serve clients throughout central and western New York, northwestern PA, as well as internationally. And we specialize in a number of areas regarding technology, but particularly have a focus in security and data protection, and I guess now in collaboration. And our presenters today primarily are going to be our CTO, Chief Technical Officer, Mike Wilson. And Mike has been working in IT for over 20 years. He worked with Data Branch when he first started his career, and then many years in the healthcare industry, and we're delighted to have him back as part of the team. And Amanda Lasky, who's our Director of Sales and Marketing. Amanda is a graduate of University of Pittsburgh, as well as an MBA from St. Bonaventure University. And both of them are terrific members of the team and have a lot to share. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them and get started.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Like Dave said, Mike Wilson, Chief Technical Officer at Data Branch. Been with Data Branch for the past year. As Dave said, I've been in IT for 2 decades, working with clients of all sizes and many different verticals. Healthcare was a big part of my IT career, and look forward to the discussion today.
Yep, and good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Lasky, our Director of Sales and Marketing here. I've been with Data Branch my entire professional career and really love getting to help the businesses in our local community find the right technology solutions to grow their business and protect their critical data and solve challenges. And one of the biggest challenges we're all going to be facing over the next few weeks is how are we going to reopen our businesses and adjust to this new normal? And I look forward to our discussion today and the role that technology is going to play in that transition. So, I went one too far. So in early March, as we all know, our world changed. We had to band together to stay home, work from home, and do our part to really reduce the spread of COVID-19. And the good news for many of us on this call is that we're in those southern tier and western New York regions, and we've met all 7 of New York State's metrics for reopening and are currently in that phase 1, expected to hopefully move into phase 2 next week without any further setbacks. So what does this mean for all of us as business owners and organization leaders? Some of you may have already started this process under phase 1. At Data Branch, we work with a lot of construction and manufacturing customers for their technology needs, and they've already started down that path to reopening. And then most of us in the professional services, finance, insurance, retail space will be joining them shortly. Overall, we know that the shape and form of back to work is starting to emerge, and utilizing your organization's business technology is going to be critical to facilitating a smooth transition back to the workplace, as all of us throughout New York, Pennsylvania, and our country begin to gradually reopen and ramp up our businesses over time. So just to review our agenda this morning, we're going to be looking at 3 key questions. First, what aspects of my business are going to remain remote, and how can I make sure that my technology is going to support those remote workers over the long term? Number two, how are our businesses in general going to reopen gradually and ramp up over time? And then how will we have to look at using our technology differently moving forward when we return to the workplace? And we've also seen a lot of different security challenges arise due to COVID-19. So we're going to share some of our best tips to help keep your organizations protected from cyber criminals. As Emily mentioned, we are going to have time for questions at the end. So I would encourage you to just put them in the chat throughout this webinar. And if we don't end up getting to your question due to time constraints, I'll make sure to reach out to anyone who has a question personally to make sure it gets answered for you. So we know that not everyone is going to go back to the office as we all transition. Many businesses may decide to have some of their workers remain as remote workers. And there are going to be positives to be drawn from this new normal, but also considerations that each business is going to have to carefully look at and decide how they want to handle them. And some of the positives of working from home long term are flexibility for your staff, their location, their hours. A lot of businesses can also see cost savings if they're able to reduce their office space or even eliminate their office space by moving completely remote. And then we've also consistently been seeing reports that have been coming out recently that show that many people have shared that they really like working from home. There's no commute, they have more flexibility. But the reality is there are considerations that we have to look at too. Like, how are you going to measure productivity for your remote employees? Do you have a company policy that specifies your do's and don'ts of working from home? And is the technology your employees are using at home, up to par from a security perspective and from a productivity perspective? Before the pandemic, only about 7% of civilian workers in the U.S. had access to a flexible workplace benefit, or telework. And that's according to the 2019 National Compensation Survey from the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this implies that many businesses didn't have formal policies with expectations for working from home when everyone suddenly became teleworkers overnight. And this is something that all organizations should implement if their workers are going to be staying home long term. So some key items to make sure you include as you're developing your work from home policy is, where is it acceptable to work? Is it truly okay for your workers to work from anywhere, like the man on the laptop at the beach? Or would it be better for them to have a more traditional at-home office setup? If someone hears your employee talking business in a coffee shop, could they hear confidential information? Are there concerns about sensitive info that might be displayed on their screens? Or will their technology be set up to mitigate the security concerns that come from using public Wi-Fi? Who's eligible to work from home? Some roles in your company, they may have been able to get by working from home over the past 2 months, but are there roles where it's optimal to still have your employee in the office? That would need to be defined in your policy. And then how's your business going to measure productivity? Many companies have been looser with their expectations on remote workers over the past 2 months, but if this is going to remain a long-term working solution, you're going to have to look at what your key performance indicators are for each role that's going to remain remote, and how you're going to measure and monitor them remotely for each team member moving forward. And if these measures are new or these are different indicators, you need to clearly state them and review with each worker who's going to be remaining remote. From an attendance and availability perspective, do your workers have to check in at certain times? Or are there time periods where they need to be available to members who are still remaining in the office? Here at Data Branch, we've been heavily utilizing Microsoft Teams to communicate and collaborate with one another. And each of our teams has a daily morning video call that everyone is expected to attend, whether they're in the office or at home. And we have set expectations for responding to chats within a set time period, and always having your video camera on when you're talking with your team members. And then how will your employees communicate and collaborate with one another? Our top 3 tips for strong communication between employees that are at home and employees that are in the office are to, number 1, encourage your remote staff to always ask themselves, what do I know? Who else needs to know? Have I told them when it comes to communication? Number 2, encourage your remote staff to over-communicate. It's better for colleagues to be told something twice than not at all. And then always ask your team to take the attitude of assume positive intent when dealing with communication from coworkers. I think we've all been on the side of an email or text that read negatively because it was lacking those cues we get from people's facial expressions or their body language when we're able to meet with them face-to-face in person. So assuming the best of each other can really help both remote and office employees overcome that hurdle. And then how will your remote users access IT support? Who will be managing technology that's now located at someone's home? Is your internal IT responsible for managing a home network? Do you need to review your agreement with your IT managed services provider to ensure that these home devices are covered under your current contract? Whichever direction you take, having the path documented and clearly stated for remote employees is key.
So proper equipment to work from home. I like this slide because it applies to not just working from home, but pretty much any of our IT infrastructure or any of our devices. I'll start with, do you know what equipment your employees are using at home? Do you know what's on those devices? So when the stay-at-home orders were executed in March, everything was moving quickly. The reality is that some businesses were positioned better than others to support the work from home, transition. They may have already had infrastructure and devices that allowed them to just pick up and move, like laptops or, cloud applications, secure VPN setup, or like a Citrix environment. But others had to scramble. So some people moved desktop devices to their home. They packed up and moved everything. Do you know what went home, if anything? Some purchased laptops quickly, which was great, but unfortunately, the impact on the supply chain became very real, and lead times to get devices became weeks or even months. This led to businesses buying whatever they could from Amazon or Walmart or even Staples. And then personal and home devices were being used. So shared family computers that we don't really have any visibility into, and we don't know what the security posture of those devices are. So all this led to our organization's networks being more vulnerable. Businesses were forced to make a decision to get users home, keep them working. So we heard phrases like, we can circle back on security once things settle down, or we just need to get people working. So not surprisingly, we've seen a huge increase in attacks directly related to work from home. Bad actors took advantage of these circumstances. They knew security practices were likely sacrificed, and they tried to capitalize on them. So with the rise in COVID-related security threats and the strong likelihood of managing a workforce that's not only remote, but also in-house, the time is now to round back on those. So for any employees who will continue to work from home, we recommend an audit of the technology that they're using to ensure that it's appropriate, it's secure, and it's sufficient to enable optimal productivity. Some questions you might not have thought to ask, do they have the same amount of screens at work versus at home so they can continue to be productive? Do they have sufficient internet access at home? Not everybody has broadband or has the availability to get broadband. Should you provide a docking station so that they can seamlessly transition from the office to the home? Ultimately, it's what do your users need to do their jobs effectively? Phone systems. Are you able to take your phones home? Some companies were able to have their employees take their phones home, plug them in, and continue business as usual. But we've seen an increase in employees giving out their personal cell phone numbers. So what are the implications for your company's standard operating procedures, or what happens if an employee leaves and they aren't using a company-owned cell phone and their personal number is what your client knows? And then how will you deploy your security stack to these devices? Has it already been deployed to these devices? Having an IT asset management system is a vital component to maintaining visibility and security of your devices. So continuing on securing of the devices theme, we've probably all heard of multi-factor authentication, MFA or 2FA. So what is that? MFA is an authentication method which a user is granted access after presenting 2 or more pieces of evidence or factors. So for example, a password and then a time-based security code using an authenticator like Google Auth on our cell phones. The moral of the story for this one is that passwords are simply just not enough anymore, no matter how strong they are. Passwords get stolen too frequently. Social engineering and phishing emails can be very convincing. The bad guys are very good at tricking people into exposing their credentials. That's their job. That's what they do. They're extremely effective at it, and it can be extremely lucrative. So MFA can help reduce this drastically. Microsoft even reports that 99.9% of Office 365 account compromises could be or could have been blocked by using multi-factor authentication. So this slide, we've got a couple pictures of multi-factor authentication and how we can accomplish that. Authenticator applications on cell phones, such as Duo or Google Auth, or a hardware token that you would need to have a manual button press to be your second factor. So MFA is truly one of the best bang for your buck security measures you can take relatively quickly, and Data Branch can guide you on the best form for your organization. Many applications even have 2FA built in, such as Office 365. All we have to do is enable them and train our employees and our users on those changes. So if multi-factor authentication is natively available, we highly, highly recommend making it mandatory as part of your organization's security policy, not just for remote, but in general. If MFA isn't available for an application, we have solutions that we can make it available. So key questions to ask yourself, how is the remote business model working? What changes, if any, are needed for vital processes to continue? Are your line of business applications available, and how do they perform? Where are your line of business applications or your critical applications? Are they housed on-prem? Are they in the cloud? Can your team securely share the data and the files they need? Are you sharing files securely right now? Who do you share files with, internally and externally? If you use Office 365, what are your sharing policies? These can be customized to allow appropriate sharing or restricted to allow very specific sharing scenarios. But they can also be set up to allow undesired sharing scenarios where anybody with a link can manipulate and edit your data. So this is an area that should be audited and controlled carefully. Do you have encryption mechanisms for sharing files? If you need to send sensitive or protected information, do you have that ability? Are your workers set up to use collaboration tools to increase productivity? What tools are you using for collaboration? Do you use many or a bunch of different ones, or are you standardized on one platform? So at Data Branch, we're using Microsoft Teams for collaboration and video conferencing, and we've standardized, and we highly recommend it. Do your users have webcams at home and in the office? I guess the last thing I'll say about collaboration is that staying visual and staying present is very important for a dispersed workforce where you've got some people in the office, some people at home, and people who are transitioning between both.
Thanks, Mike. Multi-factor authentication is definitely something that takes that little bit of second, but it has a pretty big impact. So our second question that we're going to be looking at this morning is, in general, how will our businesses reopen gradually and ramp up over time? And that's going to start with our physical offices. Practicing social distancing is still going to be of utmost importance, even when we return to our offices. So we have to be prepared to make changes to our floor plans, our conference rooms, and our signage to ensure that our teams can abide by social distancing guidelines. I saw a recent CBS News poll that showed only about 44% of workers are currently comfortable going to a workplace outside of their own home. So that means that more than half of all employees are still lacking that confidence to return to their offices or work sites. So our overall goal as leaders in our organization needs to revolve around creating an environment that's safe for all of our employees and communicating effectively with them what we've done to make those environments safe. And it starts with just doing a thorough cleaning of your workplace, and then make sure you're communicating that to your employees so that they know those steps you've taken to ensure their safety. Don't just assume that they're going to know that you did that cleaning. You know, many of us share our workplace with other businesses. So we'd recommend that when you're developing your plan to come back to the office, that you're engaging in those other businesses you share space with, and that you're having one conversation and striving to all be on the same page with the measures that you're taking. For those employees who do come in, we need to make sure that their workspace still allows them to be socially distant from others. And if that's not possible in your current space, we'll need to consider still adjusting schedules. And conference room usage will also need limited if your space doesn't allow for proper social distancing. We also, as leaders, have to lead by example and make sure that our office is well equipped with enough hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, so that our employees can be as comfortable as possible, and that make sure that we're encouraging good health behavior. And if we can't source these items, then we probably have to look at not reopening our offices until we have those available. Many of us have gone to grocery stores during this crisis and have seen how they've adjusted through signs at the registers marking 6 feet and laying down of arrows on the floor to direct the best paths for people to take so that they can stay apart. And this might be something you consider setting up in your office to ensure that your employees don't accidentally bump into others and help them enable that social distancing. You know, when we're back in our offices, there's usually a lot of group meetings. So you have to look at what your guidelines are going to be for those, especially if you're typically meeting in a more enclosed space like a conference room or a common area in your office. You might want to consider labeling those spaces with occupancy limits.
Amanda, we lost your audio there.
Uh-oh. This is David. Can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you, David.
Yeah, I'm in a different spot, a different location. Hopefully they realize that they've disconnected. I guess I'll try to keep the ball rolling here until they get back on. So I think Amanda was talking about social distancing, and obviously, that's a real critical thing, and again, communicating to your team what the what the plan is to for coming back. And it's one of the things that we've been working with internally, and be happy to share with anyone, is a plan that we have come up with. It's it's not that it's rocket science. It's just a matter of trying to put down the different policies and procedures so that you're that everyone knows that you've got a plan to go ahead. Emily, do you want to can you go to the next slide?
Certainly.
See if we can take back control since I don't have it. Here we go. So just bear with me here for one moment. Well, I'd say one thing that we've all learned throughout this is adaptability is really important. And this is, I guess, a small example of this. Here's our presentation. We're in front of our group, and the one person who was not going to be presenting has to pick up the ball. But that's okay, right? Yes, are you back, Mike?
We're back. Yeah, we didn't know.
Internet was a little out this morning, so maybe it happened again briefly.
Okay. Yep. One of our attendees had mentioned that you've been cutting in and out, so it sounds like you've had an internet problem. But if you want to take it over from here, go ahead.
Okay. Yep. I apologize, everyone. I'll try to monitor the chat more actively while I'm talking to make sure that on was the what new business processes have to be put in place. And, I like to look at that as, what did we learn during our time remote that we can implement now that we're back in the office? At Data Branch, we've gotten very good at this video communication and collaboration during our time apart, and we plan to implement that into our processes when we do return to the office, potentially more video meetings with clients. And our sales teams also had the opportunity to improve our documentation process. And again, we're going to be transitioning that with us back to the office when we return. The next question is, what changes in operations and technology need to ramp up as quickly as possible? So we just encourage you to, look at your business's core competencies and make sure an appropriate level of focus and energy is being geared toward ramping those areas back up as quickly as possible as a first step. And then what do we need to be communicating to our clients and customers? We'd encourage you to, just like with your employees, maintain an open line of communication with your clients. Make sure they know who or where they can go to get for any questions, comments, or concerns as we move forward. If you have new hours, make sure you're sharing that. If there's new visiting rules, make sure those are getting communicated effectively. And it's also a great opportunity to survey our clients. Once things get back to a new normal, we can learn what worked and what didn't, and we can use the lessons that we've learned during this crisis to update our planning and response process with our clients moving forward. And as always, we want to document what we learned in preparation for a future crisis if something like this may happen again. So moving forward, looking at our business technology and how we're going to manage it differently. Having a cybersecurity focus is really going to be critical when we're returning to work. Because while we were all banding together, cyber criminals were ramping up to take advantage of that confusion and uncertainty created by COVID-19. If you look at this chart here, there was a 30,000% increase in phishing, websites, and malware targeting remote users from January to March. And part of that is because cyber criminals were already set up to work remotely. They could just go and start pushing out their phishing emails and their different hacking methods. And essential businesses have also seen a 37% increase in ransomware attacks during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is on top of the overall rise of cybercrime and the 67% increase that the industry's been seeing in security attacks over the past 6 years. They're not slowing down, so as organizations, we need to take precautions to protect our businesses. And the top way cyber criminals have been targeting users during this pandemic is through coronavirus-themed phishing attacks and hacking campaigns. If you look at this chart from Barracuda, the number of coronavirus-related phishing attacks from the beginning of March to the end of March is just drastic. We recommend traditional security layers like firewalls, endpoint protection, but it's got to go further than that because 92% of data breaches are caused by human error and things like clicking on links in a phishing email. So educating your users is going to be key moving forward. So we wanted to just go over a few of our top tips for recognizing phishing emails. You want to start with reviewing the grammar, punctuation, and spelling in the email. Many phishing emails are written quickly so that they can be deployed quickly. And cyber criminals often take the strategy of sending out their messages to large email lists in the hopes that they'll be able to take advantage of users who haven't been educated or who are so busy that day that they get fooled because they don't take the time to review the full email. Many cyber attackers are also located in countries where English is not their first language, and this can be obvious when you read the body of the message. The second thing you want to look at is this email, the design and overall quality, what I would expect from the person who's sending it? We all have regular communication with our top clients, vendors, business partners, and in general, we know what a typical email from them looks like. So if you get an email from someone you communicate with regularly and it's suddenly missing that signature that's always there, or just doesn't sound like them, you want to take a closer look at that. Is it addressed to you personally by name, or is it a more generic greeting like friend or colleague? This can be a sign that the person sending the email doesn't actually know you, because they will push out their message to everyone they have access to in hopes that just one or two will fall for it so that they can receive their payday. The average ransomware demand is around $84,000, so they really only need to catch a few, which is why you often see these generic messages. The next thing to look at is, does it contain a threat that's asking you to act urgently? A reputable organization or government or agency won't suddenly start threatening you via email. So you should reach out to the company and confirm if there's any action needed before responding to them. And then your bank or other official companies would never ask you to supply personal information from an email. And that's information like your password, your credit card number, your social security number, or the answer to a security question. If you do get an email asking you to provide those, we'd always recommend, picking up the phone and supplying it that way, calling a number that you already know. A few other tips, always recommend, hovering over links in emails to make sure that it's going where you expect it to go or that it's a recognizable website. And then never just trust the name listed right after the from. Make sure you're looking at the actual email address and that the email hasn't been spoofed. And then finally, your last line of defense, if it just doesn't look right, listen to your gut and reach out to the sender through another medium.
Thanks, Amanda. As Amanda, just showed us, cybercrime and cyber criminals are on the rise, and they've been on the rise. But with COVID, it's even, it's accelerated. So a couple slides back, we saw the spear phishing rise, which, if anyone doesn't know what a spear phishing is, a spear phishing attack is a purpose-built, aimed phishing email to a specific person. It's not just a random send it out to a bunch of people. A spear phishing is when they try to target and identify somebody, with the hopes of exposing them. Oftentimes, they're posing as another coworker who's been compromised. So with the work from home, obviously, we see where that's a problem. It's harder to know if a coworker is the one who actually sent you an email if they're working at home. So they're trying to, act on that. So how do we combat that? We at Data Branch recommend a layered security approach. So what is that and why would we use it? It's just like running a race with hurdles in front of you. We want to put as many obstacles in front of the attack or the attackers to make it harder to complete. Hopefully you'll get tired and your mission will be unsuccessful. We layer security controls all the way up the stack, to try to protect all aspects of the environment, from the computer, the compute devices, to the users themselves, which is very important, to the network edge, and then out to the cloud. So in the slide here, you can see the three layers: foundation security, advanced security, and then compliance and incident response. Within each of these are individual layers that are purpose-built to achieve specific goals while also seamlessly integrating with the stack as a whole. So foundation security, this is our first layer, and we can see all the individual components that make that up. And when we were going over this slide in preparation, I went item by item and I talked technically about the importance of patching software and keeping it up to date, and zero-day malware, lateral network security, so on and so forth. And after about 10 minutes, I could see Amanda's eyes glazing over, and I said, I really need to spare everybody from that. So While I'm happy to have that technical discussion offline for whoever's interested, I'm going to try to instead summarize the slide by saying that, foundation security is designed to greatly reduce your organization's risk and improve your cybersecurity posture. It's our recommended minimum standard for any organization. And then the next layer in our stack is what we call advanced security. So with the current state of cybersecurity, advanced security is quickly becoming the new minimum standard. These are all items that we need to have for our organizations and our workforces. These items show our employees, clients, and business partners our continued commitment to cybersecurity and our cybersecurity posture. So we've got third-party risk assessments that help us understand any gaps in technology and ensure that we remain compliant with regulations such as the New York State SHIELD Act, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Dark web monitoring to help us ensure that none of our accounts or credentials are currently available, and if they become available on the dark web, we get alerted to it. Many of our credentials are compromised unknowingly through other sites where we either share a password or we use an integrated sign-in, and then that site is compromised. So if something like that happens, dark web monitoring is there to alert us so that we can proactively change out our passwords and make sure that nobody has a foothold into our system. Continuous end user security training and then simulated phishing attempts keep our users current on threat techniques and help us identify who would need further training. We could share lots of stories about compromises that could have been avoided if somebody had those tips Amanda shared, or that were trained and were able to spot and identify the signs of a phishing email or a spear phishing campaign. We can also share a lot of success stories where users successfully were able to use those trainings to spot the phishing campaign and then act accordingly. And then, using that to avoid all the negative outcomes that could have come along with the compromise, being, either financial or business identity. Going down, we've got password management systems. They help us keep our credentials secure and let us share them and know who's accessing them. Email encryption for sending sensitive information, written security policies, penetration testing, and then finally advanced network monitoring. This gives us the ability to know what's on our network, where it's on our network, detect different configurations, and analyze performance metrics to make sure that the network is not just secure, but it's performing well and it's available to our users no matter where they're located. And then the final layer is compliance and incident response. So making sure we stay compliant and having an incident response ready if the time comes is a vital component. So on the left, we see the New York State SHIELD Act emblem. This is an example of making sure that we stay compliant with different regulations. The New York State SHIELD Act, if anybody was wondering, stands for Stop Hacks and Improve Electronic Data Security. It's not from the Avengers. So it was signed into law last year, and it became effective March of this year. The law covers employers, individuals, and organizations, regardless of size or location, which collect private information on New York State residents. The law broadly requires that any person or business that owns or licenses computerized data, which includes private information of a New York State resident, shall develop, implement, and maintain reasonable safeguards to protect the security, confidentiality, and integrity of the private information. So if there's any healthcare professionals or anyone familiar with the healthcare vertical, and if you've even been to a hospital recently, there's HIPAA forms that you've probably signed. So the New York State SHIELD Act is kind of like HIPAA for non-medical information. HIPAA came around back in like 1996, and then they added on to it in 2009 so that employers, healthcare organizations, providers were all responsible for that electronic data that they had. So the SHIELD Act is similar to that, but just not for healthcare information. It's for any information collected on a New York State resident, any private information. And then on the right side, we've got the NIST cybersecurity framework, which ties into everything we've been talking about, protect, detect, respond, recover, and identify. The prior layers were built on 4 of those: protecting, detecting, recovering, and identifying. The respond portion is determined by our incident response plan. So, do you have an incident response plan for your organization if you had a cyber incident? Have your employees been trained on it, and do they know their role in that response? And then finally, how will implementing the response plan be managed and maintained? So, in summary, I guess, having these layers and different controls in place puts your organization in a strong position to support and secure your devices and employees, regardless of where they're physically located, whether they're at work from home or in the office, or people who move between both. This puts us in a position to have everyone covered and feel good about our security posture.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for sharing about the different levels of security we should be striving for. As we know, we have to continue to evaluate and elevate our level of security, and that what was good enough even a couple years ago is no longer the case. The second biggest thing following security when we're reviewing our business technology and preparing for reentry is making sure our collaboration and how we're going to do that is in place. And I love the chart on the right because it really puts into perspective how quickly we all had to jump into using platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams over that 3-week period in March, where you can see the number of minutes spent in Teams meetings jumped from 560 million to 2.7 billion. And we know it's likely that video and remote communication are going to continue to be favored over in-person gatherings throughout the summer. So you need to look and make sure that your organization is prepared for that. What tools are you going to use to stay connected while maintaining that social distancing? Is it going to be Teams, which is included in many Office 365 subscriptions? Are you going to continue to use Zoom? Do you have those webcams to enable video communication? How will your team collaborate on documents and share files? And are you going to be doing that in a secure manner? And then what role will video play? Some organizations have continued to stick with audio methods. One thing that turning on your video can actually help your employees do is to help them stay focused like they would if they were in an in-person meeting. When you're only on audio or you can't be seen, sometimes it's easy to get into your email and start doing other things. But if you've got that video on, people will be more likely to, have your attention. And we've helped many of our clients implement these collaboration tools so that they can keep working within these new circumstances. And we'd love to help anyone on this call as well. Do you want to wrap us up, David?
Yes, I'm back. And I was paying attention to everything you said. Thank you guys. So I think obviously, this is a huge topic, and we tried to come up with, key points that, from our experience and our learning. And one of the things that we'd like to offer every attendee is a up to 2-hour consultation via Teams to review your organization's reentry strategy. And that's really just an intent to have a discussion about some of the things that were brought up here and see if we can help to help you. And quite frankly, some of the best learning that we ever get is from working with our clients, and helping them helps us and helps other people as well. So if you'd like to do that, please reach out to Amanda. Her email is on the slide, or you can call her at Data Branch. Then also, if you visit our website, we have a page we've created there, and we have a document that would be free for download called Return to the Office After COVID-19. It's a checklist that you might find useful as well. And with that, we've got a couple of questions that I'd like to see if we can answer. And please, if you have more questions, put them in the chat. The first question is from Christopher, and he asked, we use Google for nonprofit and can enable MFA. multi-factor authentication. However, the code would go to our personal cell phones. Is that recommended? Mike or Amanda, can you answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say absolutely it is recommended. Any 2FA is better than no 2FA. Obviously, a better scenario would be to have company-owned or company-managed devices with an MDM, but I would absolutely, if your employees are willing to use their personal cell phones, we've had challenges with that, but if they are willing, I would absolutely use it, and I would use an authenticator app like Google Auth or Microsoft Auth, as opposed to using the text-based, get a code to a phone number, because that phone number might leave. So using the authenticator app is a better option, but absolutely.
Mike, you mentioned MDM. What is that?
Yeah, sorry if I'm using too many acronyms. MDM is a mobile device management platform, so you can control cell phones and devices. Even if they're not owned by the company, you could have people sign up and enroll in your MDM so that you had some controls over that cell phone, and you could wipe devices and make sure that protected company data stayed there. But for just a 2FA code, absolutely, I would recommend using any device you can.
Very good. Thank you. And a question from Melanie. What is the source for the cybersecurity tips that we shared?
Yeah, so I can jump in on that. As we were putting together the tips for this presentation, first we started off with, just the experiences we see every day, working with, businesses in our communities. At Data Branch, we also always try to stay up to date on, the latest reports that are coming out in the industry. And we belong to, a bunch of peer groups where we, share experiences and share statistics. I know some of the slides there came from, vendors who are, in this industry that are doing their own research, like Barracuda did the research on the coronavirus themed phishing attempts. So we really did pull it from a variety of sources, and just being in this world every day, what we've seen.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, again, there's an awful lot of information out there. We tried to share the things that, we've seen and frankly, experienced or helped clients with as well. And I think the security landscape has changed so much, where a few years ago, you would read about this stuff and say, oh, that's really interesting. And now, unfortunately, we've had to live it more. And the good news is, when we receive a call or an email from a client that says, hey, I got this email, it seems suspicious, we love that. We'd rather have people ask than click and find out later. Another question here from the Chemung Chamber, thank you, is are there specific tools Data Branch would recommend for productivity while working remotely? So, Mike or Amanda?
You want to take that one?
Sure. I would say we would start with, we're big Microsoft partners here at Data Branch. So what we've been using internally here is the Microsoft Office 365 platform. We got set up on Teams, which helps us all collaborate while we've been remotely through video chat, through regular chat. It's an easy way to share files, schedule appointments, things like that. We also utilize, the SharePoint and OneDrive for file sharing securely. I know Mike can tell you a little bit more about, how to set up your sharing policies to make sure that the right people are sharing things, but that's definitely one way to remain productive and a way to collaborate on documents at the same time as well, so that you're not trying to schedule terms with them.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest suite that we've used for productivity, but obviously, someone on this call is using the Google Suite. We work with clients that utilize that as well. They can do, some of those similar functions.
Yeah, especially, that's exactly right. If you're already an Office 365 user for Exchange Online or any of the subscriptions, or you're thinking about transitioning to Office 365, it's the built-in integration and components that also come along with that. A lot of people maybe didn't realize or don't know they have access to OneDrive and SharePoint and Microsoft Teams and all of the things that come with those programs. So, if you have it, fully leveraging it is fantastic. And then, if you don't have it or are thinking about it, we highly recommend the M365 platforms.
Mm-hmm. And then also, if you can set up your remote workers with, a secure VPN so that they can access, their files and applications as they would at the office, we would recommend that as well for productivity.
Very good. I think, one of the things that we found through this is how much, our experience and expertise, even though we're, in the IT business, has improved with collaboration tools. And it's nothing like a necessity to, cause you to have to want to really, dig in and use things. And I think it's one of the things we found with Office 365 and Microsoft. There's a fantastic amount of stuff besides just email behind Office 365. And, Microsoft keeps coming out with new things all the time that are designed to, really improve collaboration and productivity. And there's third-party things, for example, tools for helping schedule appointments. Like there's one I've heard of called Calendly, and there's many other ones like that to help people, work more effectively remotely from a scheduling standpoint. So that kind of stuff is great. One more question. You mentioned, Mike, SharePoint and OneDrive. And one question that would come out of that is, how can you check what my current sharing policies are? For those people who may be using OneDrive or sharing, you mentioned that there's a way to check easily to know that you're sharing your information with the right people and not too many.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think it's often overlooked by a lot of people. So anybody who's using Office 365 has what's called a tenant space. And then within that, and there's administrators of that. So a global administrator could log into the admin center of Office 365 tenant space and specifically go to the sharing sections, and OneDrive and SharePoint are a collaborative sharing settings. So you can set up, very granular policies that you can share only with internal people in your domain or in your organization, or specific external domains. Or you can have it set up that anybody with a link to a file can do whatever they want to that file, which, those are the things we would want to look out for and make sure if that's set, there's a very good reason for it, and, it's monitored and controlled. So, knowing where that is and what options are available to you are not just important, but we need to be aware of them. So they can also be granular. So that's at a global level. Different sites, different teams, different channels can have, individually set policies. So it can be a one size fits all, but there could be content that you want shared with just the whole world, and you can publish that and make it available. But you want to make sure that it's done in the correct way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Katrina asked a great question. Do you have a resource for training on using Teams? And the follow-up on that is, could this be a future training or perhaps a webinar, I would assume. So Mike or Amanda, can you answer that about resource for getting better at using Teams?
Yep. There's actually some great resources that Microsoft has put together regarding using Teams that I can definitely make sure to send you after this call, Katrina. And, that's a great idea. I'd love to do a future training on Teams. So, look out for that. I know Mike's been training a lot of our clients on using Teams. So he's gotten pretty good at that. And yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind as something for the future.
All right. One more question that we had is, you talked a lot about phishing emails. Do you have any recommendations on training people to get better. So, I like to say that, that the people, our fingers on the keyboards or hand on the mouse are the last link, in cybersecurity, and the most important link. So how do you get that better? What do you recommend?
Yeah, we really recommend making sure that training is a continuous process. It's really no longer good enough to just do an annual training or have somebody come in and talk to your people once a year. We all know that information tends to leave relatively quickly. So the approach we like to take with security training is to start with kind of that 1 hour general base training to set the foundation for all of your employees. And we recommend that as just part of your trainings, almost like a safety training. And then also layer onto that, a continuous component. So when you're looking at platforms, we have one that sends out, weekly videos to people with a weekly quiz to kind of keep security top of mind. And then also have a component where you're testing users and putting them in, real life scenarios to see how they respond. And one of the best top ways we do this is through simulated phishing attempts. Emails will go out, they'll have, fake links to click on, and as managers, you can see, which employees have clicked on those links or fallen victim to the phishing email, and then you can also focus in on, who might need more training. There's really no better way to practice than to experience it, and to do that in a safe manner is something we recommend as well.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up just a little on that. That's a fantastic continuous. Our users are, I don't want to say the weak link, but most compromises come from us letting the exploiter, letting the bad guys in through some method, probably a phishing email or a credential, compromise. It's not all like in the movies where people are literally hacking into your system. Most times they're let in, and our only defense for that is educating our users and training them on what is the current landscape, what are the current techniques, and then making sure that they know what to do and what not to do when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yep. Great.
It's a journey. It's a journey for sure. So I like to, I always, tell the team or our clients, it's basically it's a continuous process, just like I guess life itself. Unfortunately, it's just something that is part of our current reality, just like what we're dealing now with this pandemic. So with that, if there are no more questions, we'll turn it back over to Emily. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope information we shared was useful, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to David, Amanda, and Mike at Data Branch for this very informative webinar. And thank you to the Olean Chamber of Commerce for partnering with us. And we thank everyone for joining us today.
Very good. Well, thank you, guys. And I think they say, a friend of mine recently coined the phrase, be positive and don't test positive.
Enjoy the beautiful day, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.